Well, welcome back to the Azure Podcast. This is episode number 487, being recorded on the 22nd of February, 2024, with special guests Jack Lichwa and Fabian Gonzalez. I'm Sajid, and on Teams with me, we have Jack and Fabian, who we're going to get to in just a minute. But first, let's cover some updates in the Azure space from this past week. There's been maybe I have about three or four to cover over here, and one of them actually is in the topic of the discussion today, which is around Key Vault. So we'll see if our listeners want to weigh in at the time. But first, let's cover these updates. The first one is the AKS control plane metrics that are available in Managed Prometheus now. As you know, AKS clusters have the control plane metrics like the etcd performance or the API server performance, things like that. And there's a desire to have to monitor those. And so now you can, it's available, new features available where you can pull in those metrics via Prometheus from the cluster and send them out to Azure Monitor so that then you can monitor them and keep an eye on them, see if there's anything going on with the control plane in AKS. Another update that we're seeing this past week is around Microsoft DevBox. This is a nice feature in Microsoft in Azure offers where you can create these developer environments and allow developers to jump in and get VS Code and other things, other products in there in a secure manner. Now you can use configuration as code to customize those dev boxes. So let's say you have to run some tasks when the dev box is booted up. Maybe you have to install some software or do some custom tasks. There's some simple YAML configuration now you can provide that allows you to do that. So they call it customization using code, configuration as code. And so that is a new feature that's available. And then another one is with our Azure Storage Cold Storage tier. As you know, Azure Storage Cold tier was released, I think, last year. And it's essentially one of those tiers where you put information or you put your data in there that you don't expect to retrieve very frequently, right? It's only in an emergency you need to get to it, maybe for legal reasons and things like that. But what it didn't have, it never had change tracking on those on the cold storage tier. So now they've added the change feed to the cold storage tier, and so that will allow you to react whenever something is added to the cold storage tier. Maybe you need to, replicate that information somewhere else, or whatever it is you need to do to react to information being put into the cold storage tier. And so that is now available. And then Azure Redis has the enterprise tier. Uh, There's a feature where now you could have customer managed keys encrypt the disk that is used in your Redis instance. So obviously, there's many of our enterprise customers want to make sure that if Azure Redis is persisting the cache to disk, that disk is not something that can be accessed by anybody else. And so the customer can provide their own keys to encrypt that underlying volume and give that additional sense of security to the customer using it. And finally, like I said earlier, there are a few updates to Azure Key Vault, which were announced this week. And they're kind of interesting because this is almost like a new HSM, is what it sounds like, is what we or a more secure HSM is now available in Azure Key Vault, and it kind of supports things like the PCI compliance and whatnot. So I think this is something that a lot of our customers would be interested in. And Jack and Fabian, I was wondering if you had any comments on this.
Fabian, do you have anything to say on it?
Um, well, yeah, yeah, this is a recent change we've implemented. It's always advocating for our customers' security. And we're trying to definitely align with industry standards out there. And I think this is a really, really good news for our customers because actually we saw a lot of customers asking for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having this level of security in their HSMs because they want to make sure they're using the the latest. And so we basically and Jack could add more, but basically what we do with or what we did was that we migrated our infrastructure from HSM 142 level 2 FIPS protected to 142 142 level 3 HSMs. This and this will definitely improve our customer security.
Awesome. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of activity happening in the Azure Key Vault space. So, having said that, why don't we have you guys, officially introduce yourselves to our listeners and talk about all things Key Vault, because you guys are kind of the experts around Key Vault at Microsoft, and our listeners certainly want to hear about the service. It's been a long time, actually, since we talked about Key Vault specifically on the podcast. I want to say it's been many, many years since we specifically talked about Key Vault. So I'm 100% sure that a lot of things have changed since that time. So I think this is a good refresher about Key Vault in any case. So Jack, why don't you start, introduce yourself, and then Fabian, you can go after that.
So my name is Jack Lichwa. I'm a Key Vault team member.
And Fabian, what's your
Yeah,
role?
same here. My name is Fabian Gonzalez. I'm a embedded escalation engineer here, and yeah, I work really closely with the engineering team and also with our customers, their biggest pains and issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about how Key Vault fits in the overall Azure landscape, right? For me, Azure's when someone talks about Azure, the fundamental building blocks of any computer, anything in Azure are things like virtual machines, VNets, and storage, right? Those are the three things people think about as you need that, right? That's a kind of a must-have. And for me, when I think of something like Azure Key Vault, it is that almost in that same layer, right? It is the must-have service that everybody should have in their in their Azure deployment, no matter what they're deploying. But maybe you can just help our listeners get grounded and explain what Key Vault is, like at a high level. What are some of the services that Key Vault provides to any deployment in Azure?
Yeah. So basically, Key Vault is a service that was designed with, um, our mission is basically like having a world where all of your secrets are safe, always safe, and secured. That was like our mission when we started this, and we work. All of we do is align with that purpose. So we always try to make improvements on access management and secret management and all that. Basically, Key Vault is the tool you're gonna have um, to make sure your secrets, certificates, and keys are being protected and are secured, are not going to be accessed by any person that's unauthorized or are not going to be seen by anyone that you don't desire. Like you avoid to have these secrets and this stuff in your code, and we take care of that protection. It is it is like you know um, we work side by side with customers in this mission as well because they also need to they will like maybe they will implement some things like Azure policies or they also need to verify they have the right accesses provided and they are making sure they're not giving more permissions and stuff like that or they're also some customers out there are using Key Vault with Microsoft Defender for notifications stuff like that. So I would say it's like side by side work, but uh, for what it's ours, we always try to be on top of the security standards out there. But yeah, basically, that's Key Vault. That's a service you could use to store all of this information, and you can consume it securely from your application without exposing it and without having unauthorized access to it.
That's great. And I know you mentioned briefly that you said secrets, which is something that I can certainly understand. But you also said things like keys and certificates, right?
Correct.
Just and you know sometimes the kind of differences between these things gets a little bit fuzzy. But give us maybe some use cases where we would use those three. Like what are those typical those three types of I guess secrets? How are they different, and when should customers be thinking about them?
All right. Yeah. So the secrets per se, it's just something. It's just a string, right? Whatever you want to store as a secret, that will be protected. Our end will be encrypted. Um, we have a key hierarchy that will protect this information. So you could store just something like like just a um, connection string or something like that. You don't want to put that directly in your code, but you want to keep that as secured as a secret, and you want to call it from your code. So that is example for the secret, and that is like a use case you could have in your application. Some other use cases I've seen there. Some customers use the secrets to store um, their plain text keys, but they're when they store it in Key Vault, it will be protected. But it is because in Key Vault, the key management side, you cannot store a public key only, right? If you need to, we only support asymmetric keys. So if you're going to store a key, it needs to be asymmetric. So some customers use the secrets to also store the public portion of their key and use it, in their code. That is the secrets. Though we also have the keys part, right? As a key management, we're not 100% a key management solution because for that we have different options as well, and but we also take care of your keys. For example, if you are using an API, a key, to encrypt your disk in your VM or to encrypt your data, we have a lot of integration with different services. For customer managed key or something like that, you want to store that key in Key Vault, and we're gonna keep it safe, right? And also you could implement something really good that Jack worked on. It is amazing, the key rotation, right? So you could now use this key rotation feature along with Key Vault. So if you, let's say, are using this key to encrypt your storage information, you could also ask Key Vault to periodically rotate that key for you, and storage, as long as you indicate that it's having the latest version of your of your key, it will know that the key has been rotated, and it will re-encrypt your data. So this works in conjunction really good, and this is a really nice part of Key Vault that a lot of people use. And then we also have the certificate management side, which is also we keep your certificates secured in our end, and you normally customers use this for stuff like um, for example, TLS protection, stuff like that. They store their certificate in our Key Vault. We also have a lot of integrations out there with first-party services. Like one that comes to my mind is with Azure Application Gateway, where they're going to be retrieving certificates from Key Vault and use them to, to protect the traffic and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know if, well, definitely Jack has more to add in here, so I'll let him go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great summary, Fabian. So we can divide that the Key Vault is more like a three products. It's one. We have a secret, which many times are credentials, which allows application to access other resources like storage accounts, SQL, etc. Certificates secure the transport of the data between services. And keys will protect your data at rest. So as you mentioned before, that Redis right now allows you to encrypt the data with keys. Yes, they are coming from Key Vault, this integration with Key Vault. So that's basically what all areas of security we provide, from data protection and access protection.
That's great. Yeah, I was just remembering I use Azure Bastion to log into some of my VMs, and the SSH key, I've put it in Key Vault, and it just kind of comes from Key Vault automatically. I don't have to ever worry about getting the key. So that is, my favorite use of Key Vault is to put those SSH keys out there, because they're secure. You access you access them using your RBAC policies or RBAC rules, and it just kind of gets pulled in automatically, and you can just transparently log into the VM without using a password, right? So I think that is one of my favorite features. The one thing that's kind of always troubled me with Key Vault is, like, it's kind of it used to be this classic chicken and the egg problem, right? Okay, I'm putting my secrets in Key Vault, but how do I get to Key Vault? I need a secret to get to Key Vault in the first place, right? And I call that a chicken and the egg problem, because then where do you put that secret, right? So but nowadays, I know with the advent of managed identities and whatnot, it's a lot easier. But maybe can you just talk about how are customers kind of accessing Key Vault? Are they all using managed identities? Do they use user managed, system managed? I'm just curious what you're seeing out there, and what are some of the pain points in that space.
Yeah, so a lot of customers are using managed identity. That's what we foster and we encourage people to use, because that's a more secured way that you could use to access Key Vault. In that case, you don't need to access any secret or stuff like that, as you mentioned, the chicken and the egg and stuff. But because that it happens that for some scenarios, like when you're using an outside application, let's say you have an application on the Entra ID B, right, and you want to access data from Key Vault in Entra ID A. In those scenarios, for example, unless the service supports cross-tenant authentication, it will not be possible for them to access the Key Vault data unless you create, let's say, a service principal for them in tenant A, and then you provide the credentials to that application, let's say, running outside of the tenant. Because this is really important, it is all part of the security in the authentication here. We need to authenticate that the identity trying to access that information in Key Vault is actually authorized, right? And if the identity is residing on a different tenant, we need the customer to provide this information. So yeah, right now you could use client secret, client ID, or client certificate and client ID to access Key Vault. You could also use managed identities, or you could also use, depending on the interface you're using, you could use, for example, if you're using an SDK in Visual Studio, you could use Visual Studio per se to authenticate. You just enter your credentials, and that's it you need to do, right? But yeah, I don't know if Jack has more to add here.
Yeah, it's a good summary. The one interesting case is what you do when you have resources on-prem. This capability with the Azure Arc VMs, when you actually can use managed identity, and then you don't need any secret, managed identity handles it for you. But there are still cases which that's not available, and the only workaround and that way is to deploy certificate and store it, for example, in the Windows Certificates Manager, and then our SDK can automatically pick it up and connect to Key Vault that way. But yes, eliminating secrets, it's really, really big problem, and managed identity and ID out, that's something what we try to use to help with it. One also interesting area is that cross-tenant scenarios. So we recently actually also work with storage, Cosmos DB SQL, to allow cross-tenant communication without using the secret. So think about independent service vendor has a SaaS solution, and they have their own customers with data, and they want to protect this data with their own keys. So here you can have a customer with their tenant, enter Key Vault with the key, and let's say Adobe. And Adobe will be able to use user-assigned identity and identity federation to use to connect to the customer Key Vault and encrypt the data with it. So that's scenarios which we're working on. So it's going to be more about identity federation and make those cross-cloud scenarios available. So you can avoid the chicken and egg scenario. You can avoid the secret, which manage identity and identity management help.
That's very good.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
That was one of the things that you know, when I started learning about Key Vault, I was like, okay, so I will be keeping my secret security in Key Vault, but I need to still put a secret in my code, right? I remember I asked Jack, and
Yeah, that was always
that is part
like,
of.
wait a minute, what do I do here?
But we're getting rid of that, and we're thinking about, you know, more robust solutions, and that's what Jack mentioned about cross authentication, federation, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and another thing that's bothered me, you know, with all of these services so dependent on Key Vault, right? The reliability of Key Vault becomes very important, right? Because it almost seems like if that's not there, I'm down, right? There's nothing I can do. And so I'm curious how customers are, you know, tackling the reliability thing with Key Vault. Like, you know, I've heard some people where they copy, you know, all the information from all their secrets from on keys from one Key Vault to another, and then they kind of use a primary and a backup scenario. Like, I was wondering, like, what are some of the options customers have to ensure that Key Vault is always available, even if, let's say, an AZ goes down?
Yeah. So in that part, we have a redundancy system, let's say, that will automatically take care of that part for customers. For example, when you create your Key Vault, there's a replica of that Key Vault, a secondary Key Vault that will be created in a different region, and there are also local copies that will be created in the same region of that Key Vault. So in case there's something, for example, if there's something affecting the region specifically, or a data center in the region, we're going to be failing over to a data center on the same region to, or we're just going to be consuming the, let's say, the whatever is failing, let's say networking or storage or computing or stuff like that, whatever of that type of resources, we're going to be using that on the same region. But if it's the whole region that's like, you know, having an outage or something like that, we're going to be failing over your requests to a Key Vault on the secondary region. All of this happens automatically. Customers don't have to do anything. You know, the process goes like this. Just if we notice there's something happening in the primary region of your Key Vault, we're gonna be redirecting your calls to the secondary region. And during this time, it will be like 15 minutes or something before you could start like making write operations, because during this time you will be having only read-only access to your Key Vault. Yeah, Jack.
That's good. Yeah, I think that definitely helps. So so this is part of the service, right? The customer doesn't have to do anything. Like a replica is already set up, pretty much like blob storage, I suppose, right? If you use like a GRS blob storage, there's local replicas, there's replicas in other regions. So it just sounds like Key Vault kind of works in the same way. The name that you use is still the same, right? It's always that primary name for the Key Vault, but it just gets routed to the kind of to the backup site if there's a problem with the primary. And another thing that's kind of, you know, as an application developer, it's kind of troubled me a little bit when using Key Vault is the performance of Key Vault, right? Specifically, it's never clear to me whether, you know, I can be, you know, hitting Key Vault heavily in my application to get secrets all the time, or should I, you know, take the secrets, put them in my application memory and cache them, right? And what's the right strategy? Because obviously there's pros and cons, right? If I cache the secrets and if there's updates to the secrets, I want to know about them, right? It's something that I want to know about. So a lot of customers tend to, read from the Key Vault more frequently so that any updates to those secrets, like in the case where, there is rotation of keys or the connection string has been modified and changed, they want to be able to access that, more kind of in a shorter period of time. So from a performance perspective, what should customers be? How are customers handling this? Are there performance implications with Key Vault to start with?
Yeah, and in this one, I'll let Jack answer in it because I wouldn't say like recently because it happened like more than a year ago, but we doubled our service limit capacity, and that is that was basically to tackle some of these scenarios because some customers were finding throttling issues when they were trying to make a lot of requests to Key Vault, but I think we have improved a lot in that area.
Yeah, that's correct. We double the throughput, but in general, as maybe it's not known that Key Vault is designed for really granular isolation of the of your secrets, and with that in mind, you have one Key Vault per application, per region, per environment. So in case of a breach or issue, the impact is really minimal to the one application. And with that, usually 400 per second should be enough for most of the application to handle. Yes, we recommend to cache secrets and certificates on the node. And the pattern we also require to have expiration overlap. So for example, even if you rotate the certificate, the previous certificate is still available for, today we recommend around 30 days. And the same will be with secrets. If you have a primary and secondary access key to storage, for example, you rotate the one key and the expiration of the another is another 30 days. So you don't have to really call it all the time. We right now recommend maybe once per day should be enough. And that's how, for example, application services does today. They just call Key Vault once a day to refresh. But you have to make sure that you follow the pattern that previous secrets not expire right away.
Yeah.
It has another 30 days to expire. And that's how we handle the resiliency in that area.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, kind of it just leads me to a related question on the. You mentioned that the recommendation is that every application should have their own Key Vault, right, or should use their own Key Vault. And then there's a couple, and I can understand that because you can specify the RBAC policies, and you could kind of lock it down to that one application access. But then if you think about a typical enterprise customer, they have hundreds of applications, right? And now they'll have hundreds of Key Vaults, maybe probably more than hundreds, many hundreds. And then, managing the secrets across all of these instances is going to be a problem, right? Because, typically what happens, a lot of these secrets are, I would say, the same, right? Okay, the database string from big database is going to be the same for all 100 applications, right? And now they have to make sure that all these 100 Key Vaults get updated correctly anytime there's a change to that connection string. And so that's, I guess for me, that's been a challenge. How do customers manage all these secrets across this entire estate of Key Vaults? Flip side to that, what I have noticed missing in Key Vault and I wish would be there would be some sort of a hierarchical representation of secrets, right? There's no hierarchy in Key Vault. I think it's a flat. Am I correct? It's a flat kind of namespace, so to speak. It's just one list, or can we have hierarchies in Key Vault?
Yeah, I will try to answer that one. So yeah, you can say that it's flat, but it really relates to how Azure is structured. As you know that today that subscription is a scalable point. So you have to divide your application per subscriptions. And Key Vaults actually go together with those applications. So yes, our focus was on security. So imagine that, let's say secret is leaked. Today we have ability that even if secret is leaked, you can only access the resource from the application VM because you can do the network level restriction. So that was really our main focus, that you can really minimize limit the scope of the breach. So that
the blast
was really
radius,
the
so to speak.
blast radius. So and it's the same why we recommend per region and per environment. So that was our really main focus. Security is our heart, and that was the reasoning. You can still think about the hierarchy. If you think about subscription is like a first folder, resource group is another folder, and then is a key vault. So hierarchical view is over subscriptions and resource groups. And in terms of centralized management, we have Azure policy when you can deploy and control any settings of key vaults across entire management group, which is cross subscriptions. Right. You can enforce any compliance policy across all secrets. But yes, our vision was to really make granular isolation and limit the scope of the breach. And if you can see that only application have access to Key Vault, with Airbag today, we allow you to completely remove the persistent access to users too. So with Airbag, you can use a pen with just-in-time access. So in that case, even that this old user identity which somebody forgot and it got compromised, or any token from the users will not be able to use to access the secret because they really no persistent access at all. They will need like a secondary approval from the administrator to really get access. So we really go towards completely eliminating any access possible to Key Vault and limit that to only application and secure networks with really granular isolation in terms of network, identity, and logging.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, security is certainly the primary concern there. I guess you could always use things like like DevOps or automation to keep all these secrets synchronized if you have to deploy to multiple key vaults and whatnot. That's another way to do it.
It is correct, but we see that as a fallacy because then you're gonna give the DevOps access to your key vaults. And what's gonna happen when DevOps is compromised? So we really want to go out of that pattern and really have application to reach the secrets. And DevOps can just maybe pass their URIs to the secrets to deploy the URIs, but actual application download the secret, and only application has access to the secret. With recent new features, we're working on the integration of CVM, confidential VMs, which today we only allow to securely release the keys to the confidential VMs. We're gonna also in future allow it for secrets and certificates. So imagine that even operators will never have access to one secret because only that confidential VM will have access to double encrypted secret and certificate in Key Vault. So we're going in the direction of complete security. No operators have access to any secrets; they are not visible. And that's our direction.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying that, Jack. Zero trust, yes.
Zero trust.
Trust nobody. Good. No, that's great. Thanks you. So, yeah, this has been great discussion. Certainly, a lot of great tips from you guys. Is there anything else that you feel you want to share with our listeners about best practices for Key Vault, or any things that any kind of interesting things you've seen when you work with customers using Key Vault?
Well, in my case, the first thing I would like to do is to add a clarification on the first message we were given about the HSM enhancement. Just make a quick note that this fix 142 level 3 are going to be available for premium AKVs, right? This will be coming for the HSM protected keys and not for the standard protected keys. Just making that clarification. But on the other side about customer scenarios, yesterday I was thinking about this, and I think it's it's all about that. They always there's like I would divide it like a 50-50, right? Because 50% of them want to have like a centralized solution where they have all of this. They're able to handle all of these keywords at the same time and replicate or synchronize information between them, and then having them, they want to easy access and easy accessibility to all of these keywords. That like the 50%, and there's the other 50%, which is, as Jack mentioned, where we are actually driving all of our efforts, is the ones that think on security. They want to restrict the key vault as much as they can. They want to make sure they're not giving more access that they should. They use just-in-time access, and we also have heard of customers that they want, okay, I want my user to be able to handle network settings for Key Vault, but that's the only thing I want that user to do. I don't want the user to be able to delete or modify the Key Vault or any of its data, right? Stuff like that. So we're hearing a lot of customers, trying to make isolation their best priority. So I think that's kind of what I've seen so far. Yeah.
Thank you, Fabian. And I want to add that with that new HSM hardware, we have FIPS level 3 compliance. Previously, financial institutions, insurance companies with have FIPS level 3 requirement could use only managed SM, which is really high cost. Think about 2,000-4,000 per month. So now FIPS level 3 is available in the low cost for you for just $1 per key. So that's really the biggest news for customers, especially who need to use FIPS level 3 compliance. So they don't have to manage SM anymore. Second important move to airbag. The access policy are vulnerable. The contributor today can give themselves access to the secrets. And considering that contributor is widely used across any DevOps, it's the biggest cost of the breach today. So move to airbag, isolated that permission that only owners and user access administrators can manage access to your Key Vault. Use PEM, just-in-time access, so to reduce breaches if user identity is compromised. And keep granular network restriction for your application. So even if the application identity is compromised, attackers cannot access your secrets.
Yeah, I would add to that. Yeah, also the networking protection. Make sure, as long as it's possible, to use private endpoint communication, so that you make sure you're using private channel for communication and all of that. That you have your firewall turned on, and you are monitoring what's accessing your Key Vault. Have your logs enabled. That's really, really important. These logs don't come like enabled by default. You need to enable the Key Vault logs after the deployment, and this is really really important, because this will help you to understand what's going on with your Key Vault. What are the calls happening at with your secrets, keys, and certificates? Who's calling them? Who's, for example, who has made some update on it or stuff like that. Yeah, we got a lot of customers. Sometimes they're coming to us saying like, hey, could we know who deleted this secret, for example? That's all in the log, so that's a great recommendation for customers out there.
That is very, very useful. Thank you. And thanks, both of you. Really appreciate you guys sharing all of your insights into Azure Key Vault today. It's been a great experience for me to understand all of these recommendations, tips, and tricks, and I'm sure our listeners would have got a lot out of it already. Thank you again so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll see you sometime soon.
Thank
you
you
very much, Sujit. It's been a pleasure.